Brock made a fatal mistake when he tried to erase Aira. As the most ruthless alpha in the state, he treated the loyalty of his human maid as a joke, throwing her off Blackwood Ridge in the hopes that the jagged rocks would keep his secrets. But he was wrong. At the bottom of that cliff, destiny was waiting. He didn't know that the most powerful creature in existence, the Alpha King's only son, would find her broken body, and he certainly never suspected that the fragile girl he tried to kill was about to rise from the ashes as his queen. The rain in Washington state hits different when you're poor, alone and human in a town run by wolves. It feels heavier, colder. Her name was Aira Collins. To most people in the town of Oakhaven, she was invisible. To the Silver Creek Pack, she was worse than invisible. She was a liability. Aira worked at the Pack House, a sprawling estate hidden behind layers of pine forest and security gates. Her job was simple: clean up the mess the wolves left behind. Blood, mud, broken furniture. It didn't matter. She kept her head down, collected her paycheck, and prayed she could save enough to move to Seattle before she turned 25. But Alpha Brock didn't like loose ends. Brock was handsome in that terrifying, predatory way. He was 6'4", with a jawline that looked like it was cut from granite, and eyes that had zero soul behind them. He had just taken over the pack after his father passed, and he was paranoid. He was convinced that humans were leaking pack secrets to hunters, that Tuesday started like any other. Aira was scrubbing the hardwood floors in the main hall. The smell of lemon polish was mixing with the metallic scent of rust, or maybe dried blood, coming from the basement. She knew better than to ask. "Aira!" a voice boomed. She froze. Brock was standing at the top of the staircase. Beside him was his beta, a man named Caleb. Caleb was a weasel of a man who enjoyed tripping her when she carried laundry baskets. "Sir?" Aira asked, standing up and wiping her hands on her apron. "My office. Now." Her stomach dropped. She hadn't done anything. She was the perfect employee. She never spoke unless spoken to. She walked up the stairs, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. When she entered the office, Brock didn't tell her to sit. He was standing by the window, looking out at the storm brewing over the mountains. On his desk was a file folder. "Do you know what this is, Aira?" he asked, his voice deceptively calm. "No, Alpha." "It's a transfer of funds. $50,000, sent to a hunter organization in Oregon." He turned to face her, his eyes flashing amber. "It was sent from an IP address inside this house." I don't know anything about that," she stammered. "I just clean the floors. I don't even have the Wi-Fi password." Brock laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "That's the problem with humans. You're all liars. Caleb says he saw you in here yesterday when I was out." "That's a lie." Aira looked at Caleb, who was leaning against the doorframe, smirking. "I was in the laundry room all day. Check the cameras." "The cameras in the hallway malfunctioned yesterday," Caleb said smoothly. "Convenient." "I need to make an example," Brock said, walking toward her. The air in the room grew heavy, the pressure of his alpha aura crushing down on her. Aira fell to her knees, gasping for air. "The neighboring packs think I'm soft because I employ humans. They think I'm weak. Today I prove them wrong." He didn't fire her. He didn't call the police. He grabbed her by the back of her neck. The next 20 minutes were a blur of terror. She was dragged out to the black SUV waiting in the driveway. Caleb drove. Brock sat in the back with her, his grip on her arm bruising the skin. We drove up the winding logging roads toward Blackwood Ridge, a notorious drop-off point where the locals said accidents happened. "Please," Aira begged, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't do it. Check my bank account. I have $300 to my name. Please, Brock." "It's Alpha Brock," he corrected. The car stopped. The rain was torrential now, slashing sideways. Caleb dragged her out of the car. They were at the edge of the cliff. Below them, hundreds of feet down, the river raged against sharp, unforgiving rocks. "This is what happens to traitors," Brock shouted over the wind. "I'm not a traitor," she screamed. He didn't hesitate. He didn't blink. He just shoved her. The wind was knocked out of her instantly. She fell backward into the grey void. She saw Brock's face one last time, cold, satisfied, before the sky spun away. Aira hit the water, and everything went black. She shouldn't have survived. By all medical logic, the impact should have stopped her heart, or the rocks should have shattered every bone in her body. But fate is funny. Aira didn't hit the rocks directly. She hit the canopy of an ancient pine tree jutting out from the cliff face first. Branches snapped, slowing her fall, tearing her skin, but breaking the momentum. Then she hit the water. The current was freezing, a shock of ice that forced her body to fight, even when her mind wanted to give up. She tumbled through the rapids, lungs burning, until the river spat her out onto a gravel bank miles downstream. She lay there for what felt like hours. The rain had stopped, replaced by a thick, eerie fog. Every inch of her screamed in pain. Her left arm was broken, she could tell by the angle, and her ribs felt like jagged glass inside her chest. She coughed up water and tried to crawl toward the tree line. She needed shelter. If the wolves came to check the body, she was dead. Aira made it to a cluster of ferns before she collapsed. She closed her eyes, accepting that this was the end. She was just Aira. No pack, no family, no hope. Snap. Her eyes flew open. A twig broke nearby. She held her breath, terror spiking. Had Caleb come down to finish the job? "Dada," a small voice whispered. Aira blinked, trying to clear the mud from her eyelashes. Emerging from the fog wasn't a wolf. It was a child. He couldn't have been more than 4 years old. He was wearing a muddy, oversized t-shirt and no shoes. His hair was a mess of dark curls, and his eyes were the most striking shade of violet she had ever seen. He toddled toward her, absolutely fearless. "Hey," she rasped, her voice sounding like gravel. "Run. Run away." The boy didn't run. He stopped right in front of her, tilting his head. He sniffed the air, his little nose twitching. Then he did something impossible. He dropped to his knees in the mud and placed his tiny, warm hand on her forehead. A jolt of electricity shot through her. It wasn't painful. It was warm, soothing. The pain in her ribs dulled instantly. "Mine," the boy said firmly. "What?" she whispered. "Mine," he repeated. He curled up next to her, tucking his small body against her injured side as if he were a heater. Then she heard it. The sound of heavy paws thundering against the earth. Not one wolf. Many. "Leo!" a deep voice roared, shaking the trees. The boy, Leo, popped his head up but didn't move from her side. A massive wolf burst through the brush. He was midnight black, easily twice the size of the wolves in Brock's pack. He was terrifying. He snarled when he saw Aira, baring teeth the size of daggers. He crouched, ready to spring. Aira flinched, shielding Leo with her good arm. "Don't hurt him!" she screamed, though it came out as a weak croak. The wolf froze. He looked at her. Then he looked at the boy. Leo growled, a tiny, adorable but serious growl, at the massive beast. He put his hand on her chest again. "No, Dada, mine." The giant wolf's eyes widened. The aggression melted away, replaced by confusion and shock. The wolf shimmered, bones cracking and reshaping until a man stood in his place. If Brock was handsome, this man was a god. He was towering, with dark skin that gleamed in the moonlight and scars that told 1,000 stories of war. He radiated power so intense it made the air vibrate. He was naked, but he didn't seem to care. Another man, clearly a subordinate, rushed forward to hand him a pair of tactical shorts. The man pulled them on and walked slowly toward them, his hands raised in surrender. "I'm not going to hurt you," the stranger said. His voice was deep, commanding, but gentle. "Who are you?" Aera whispered, her vision blurring. "I am Dominic," he said. "The Alpha King." He looked down at his son, who was still clinging to her. "And that is Leo, my son. And it appears—" Dominic looked at Aera with an intensity that made her soul shiver. "It appears he has chosen you as his mother." "I'm human," she managed to say. Dominic smirked, a dangerous, beautiful expression. "Leo doesn't care, and if the prince chooses you, then you are under the protection of the crown." He knelt down and scooped her up into his arms as easily as if she weighed nothing. "Sleep now. Whoever did this to you, they will burn for it." As she blacked out against his chest, Aera realized one thing. Brock had thrown away a servant. But the king had just found a family. Waking up in the Alpha King's estate was like waking up on a different planet. Aera was used to a cot in a damp basement at the Silver Creek pack house. Here, she was in a bed the size of her old apartment. The sheets were silk, and the air smelled of lavender and expensive mahogany. But the first thing she noticed wasn't the luxury. It was the weight on her legs. She lifted her head weakly. Leo, the little boy from the river, was curled up across her shins like a puppy, fast asleep. His thumb was in his mouth, and his other hand was clutching the hem of the oversized T-shirt she had been changed into. The door creaked open. A woman in a nurse's uniform stepped in, followed closely by Dominic. Dominic looked different in the daylight, more imposing, if that was possible. He wore a tailored charcoal suit that strained against his shoulders. The moment he entered, the air in the room grew heavy with his scent, wood smoke, and ozone. "He hasn't moved for 12 hours, Dominic said softly, nodding at his son. "Every time we tried to take him to his own room, he screamed the house down. It seems you are stuck with him." "Where am I?" Aera asked, her voice still raspy. "The Obsidian Peak," Dominic answered. "My home. And now, yours." The nurse checked her vitals, her expression sour. She was a werewolf. Aera could tell by the way she wrinkled her nose at her. She didn't like touching a human. "Her ribs are knitting, Alpha." "But she's weak. A human shouldn't heal this fast, even with our medicine. It's the boy's influence." "Thank you, Sheila. Leave us," Dominic commanded. When they were alone, Dominic pulled a chair close to the bed. He looked at her with those intense, dark eyes. "You need to understand what happened at the river, Aera. Leo isn't just a child. He is a pure-bred royal. His instincts are ancient. When he claimed you, when he said mine, he created a bond. It's rare. It hasn't happened in centuries." "I don't understand," she whispered. "I'm nobody. To him, you are everything. You are his mother now. The moon goddess doesn't make mistakes." Dominic leaned forward, his voice dropping to a dangerous rumble, "Which means you are under my direct protection. But you need to know, my pack is not happy." He wasn't lying. 2 days later, Aera was well enough to walk. She ventured out of the room, Leo trailing behind her, holding her hand. The hallways were lined with portraits of stern-looking ancestors. As she walked, she passed pack members, guards, servants, high-ranking officials. The silence was deafening. They stared. They glared. She heard the whispers. "A human? Raising the prince? It's a disgrace. She's a spy." She tried to ignore them, but it came to a head in the solarium. Aera was sitting, watching Leo chase butterflies, when a shadow fell over her. She looked up to see a striking woman with red hair and eyes that looked like emerald shards. She was beautiful, but her sneer ruined it. This was Sienna, the daughter of the king's beta. Everyone assumed she would eventually marry Dominic. "You must be the pet," Sienna said, her voice dripping with venom. Aera stood up, her legs shaking slightly. "My name is Aera." "I don't care what your name is, rat." Sienna stepped closer, her claws slightly extending. "You think because the pup likes you, you're safe? Dominic keeps you here out of pity. Once the boy gets bored, you'll be thrown back into the trash where you belong." She shoved Aera. It wasn't hard enough to break bones, but enough to knock her back into a rose bush. The thorns bit into her skin. "Stop!" Aera gasped. "Or what?" Sienna raised her hand to strike her. Suddenly, a low, vibrating growl shook the glass walls of the solarium. It wasn't Dominic. It was Leo. The 4-year-old was standing between Aera and Sienna. His violet eyes were glowing. The air around him crackled with raw, chaotic energy. "No!" Leo screamed. A shockwave of energy blasted out from the toddler. It hit Sienna square in the chest, throwing her backward 10 feet. She crashed into a stone fountain, gasping for air. Guards rushed in, weapons drawn, followed by Dominic. He took in the scene instantly. Aera bleeding from the thorns, Sienna groaning on the ground, and Leo standing guard over Aera, his little chest heaving. Dominic looked at Sienna, his face a mask of cold fury. "You touched her?" "She provoked me," Sienna lied, coughing up water. Dominic walked over to Aera, gently pulling her out of the bushes. He checked her scratches, then turned to his beta's daughter. "Aera is not a pet," Dominic announced, his voice amplified so the entire household could hear. "She is the mother of the prince. The next person who disrespects her will be exiled. Permanently." He picked up Leo and put his other arm around Aera's waist. For the first time in her life, she wasn't just safe. She was feared. A week later, Aera was sitting in Dominic's massive office. The physical wounds were fading, but the mental scars were still there. She jumped at loud noises. She couldn't stand near windows. Dominic sat behind his desk, reviewing a stack of documents. "It's time, Aera," he said, without looking up. "I need the name." Aera froze. She knew this was coming. "If I tell you, he'll start a war." Dominic looked up, a dark amusement dancing in his eyes. "A war? Against me? Aera, I am the Alpha King. I don't fight wars with insects. I crush them." She took a deep breath. "His name is Brock, Alpha of the Silver Creek Pack." Dominic froze. He slowly put down his pen. "Silver Creek. Yes." He spun his computer monitor around. "Is this him?" On the screen was a picture of Brock, smiling at a charity gala, looking like the perfect leader. Seeing his face made bile rise in her throat. "That's him," she whispered. "And the man next to him is Caleb." Dominic began to type furiously. Silver Creek has been flagged for financial irregularities for months. They claimed drought and famine to request emergency funds from the Crown. Millions of dollars. "There was no drought," she said, finding her voice. "He built a new training facility. He bought luxury cars. He sent money to hunters in Oregon to take out rivals." Dominic stopped typing. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "Hunters? You saw this?" "I saw the wire transfer. That's why he tried to kill me. He said I was a spy, but he was just covering his tracks." Dominic picked up his phone. He dialed a number and put it on speaker. "This is Commander Cade," a voice answered. "Cade," Dominic said, his voice flat and terrifying. "Initiate a silent audit on the Silver Creek Pack. Freeze their assets immediately. But do not alert Alpha Brock. I want him to feel comfortable." "Understood, my king. What is the objective?" "Total dismantling," Dominic said. "And Cade? Find out if they have any upcoming public appearances." "Checking." "Yes, sir. The annual Alpha Summit is in 3 days. Alpha Brock is scheduled to give the keynote speech on pack loyalty." Dominic laughed. It was a dark, predator's sound. Perfect. Let him speak. Let him feel like a god. We will attend. Ira panicked. I can't go there. He'll see me. He'll kill me. Dominic stood up and walked around the desk. He took her hands in his. His hands were rough, calloused, and incredibly warm. He won't kill you, Aura. He won't even be able to breathe in your direction without my permission. Dominic lifted her chin. You aren't the maid anymore. You are the woman who tamed the royal heir. We aren't just going to the summit. We are going to make an entrance. And you are going to be the one to drive the knife in. I don't know how to be powerful, she admitted, tears pricking her eyes. I just know how to clean floors. Dominic wiped a tear from her cheek. Then I will teach you. For the next 3 days, you don't clean. You train. The next 3 days were hell, but a different kind of hell than Aira was used to. Dominic didn't hand her over to a generic trainer. He trained her himself. He taught her how to walk, not with her head down, but with her chin up, exposing her neck as a dare, not a submission. He taught her how to hold eye contact with a wolf. Don't look away, he growled at her in the pack gym. If you look away, you yield. You are human, Aura, which means you have something we don't. You have no inner wolf to submit to his aura. Use that. Let his power wash over you and stand still like a rock in a stream. They spent hours on etiquette, on politics, on history. Leo was there the whole time, cheering her on from the sidelines with a mouth full of crackers. Go, Mama! He'd yell whenever she successfully recited the lineage of the northern clans. But the hardest part was the wardrobe. On the morning of the summit, a team of stylists arrived. They didn't bring soft pastels or floral prints. They brought armor disguised as fashion. The dress they chose was midnight blue, so dark it looked black. It was made of a shimmering fabric that hugged every curve she didn't know she had, with a slit that went up to her thigh and a neckline that plunged daringly deep. This is too much, she said, staring at herself in the mirror. She barely recognized the woman looking back. Her hair was swept up in an intricate braid woven with silver wire. Her makeup was sharp, highlighting her cheekbones and giving her eyes a smoky, mysterious look. It is exactly enough, Dominic said from the doorway. Aira turned. Dominic was wearing his formal Alpha King regalia, a black military-style suit with silver threading and medals that gleamed under the lights. He looked devastating. He walked over and placed a necklace around her neck. It was a heavy silver choker with a single, massive violet gemstone in the center. This, Dominic said, clasping it, is the royal crest. It signifies that you are under my personal protection. If anyone touches you, they challenge the throne. She touched the cold stone. I'm scared, Dominic. Good, he said. Fear keeps you sharp, but remember this. Brock thinks you are dead. He thinks you are a ghost. Ghosts are terrifying. They took the private jet to the summit location in Chicago. The entire flight, Aira's heart hammered. Leo was with a nanny back at the estate. Dominic said this was too dangerous for him. The summit was held in a massive convention center ballroom. As they walked toward the heavy oak doors, she could hear the hum of hundreds of voices inside. The scent of 1,000 wolves hit her. Musk, pine, aggression. Ready? Dominic asked, offering her his arm. No, she said honestly. Do it anyway. The herald at the door slammed his staff on the ground. The doors groaned open. Announcing His Majesty, Dominic Blackwood, the Alpha King, the herald boomed. The room went silent instantly. The music stopped. Every head turned. Dominic walked in, radiating an aura of power that physically pushed people back. Aira walked beside him, her hand on his arm, her head held high, just like he taught her. She scanned the room. She saw them. Alpha Brock was standing near the stage, holding a glass of champagne, laughing at something Caleb had said. He looked successful, arrogant. Then He looked at the door. His eyes swept over Dominic, full of respectful fear, and then slid to Aira. He blinked. He frowned. He tilted his head. She saw the moment realization hit him. His face went slack. The glass of champagne slipped from his fingers and shattered on the marble floor. The sound echoed in the silent room. He looked like he had seen a corpse. Dominic leaned down to her ear. "Smile, Aura." She forced a cold, sharp smile. Brock took a stumbling step back, mouthing one word. "Impossible!" Dominic guided her through the parting crowd, straight toward the stage where Brock was standing. They didn't stop until they were right in front of him. "Alpha Brock," Dominic said, his voice smooth and loud enough for everyone to hear. "I hear your speech tonight is about loyalty. I brought a special guest who is dying to hear it." Brock was shaking. He looked at Aira, his eyes darting to the royal crest around her neck. "Your Majesty, Who is this?" Aira stepped forward, breaking the distance. She looked him dead in the eye, letting the silence stretch, letting him sweat. "Hello, Alpha," she said, her voice steady. The water was cold. The grand ballroom of the summit was a sensory minefield. For a wolf, it would have been overwhelming. For a human, it was nearly suffocating. The air was thick with the scents of 1,000 predators, expensive cologne and perfumes failing to mask the underlying notes of musk, ozone, and territorial aggression. The crystal chandeliers overhead cast a fractured, dazzling light over the room, but it did nothing to warm the chill that ran down her spine. Every eye was on them. Dominic walked with a lazy, predatory grace, his hand resting lightly but possessively on the small of her back. To the onlookers, it might have looked like a romantic gesture. To Aira, it was a lifeline. His touch was a constant stream of heat, grounding her, reminding her that the man who could crush mountains was on her side. They carved a path through the crowd. Alphas from the southern and eastern packs parted like the Red Sea, their eyes darting from Dominic's stoic face to the shimmering royal crest around her neck. She heard the whispers ripple outward, a tide of confusion and judgment. Who is she? Is that a human? Look at her neck. He's claimed her under crown law. Wait, isn't that the girl who used to clean the tables at Silver Creek? Aira kept her chin high, her eyes fixed on the stage. Don't look at them. Dominic had trained her. If you look at the crowd, you seek their approval. Look only at your target. Her target was standing at the podium. Alpha Brock was in the middle of a sentence, his hand raised in a gesture of benevolent leadership. He looked immaculate in a tailored tuxedo, the picture of a modern, successful alpha. He was laughing at something his beta, Caleb, had just whispered to him. He looked like a man who had gotten away with everything. Then he saw her. The transformation was subtle at first, then catastrophic. It started in his eyes, a flicker of confusion. He squinted against the stage lights, trying to make sense of the silhouette approaching him. Then, as they stepped into the pool of light near the stage, recognition hit him like a physical blow. His smile didn't just fade, it curdled. The color drained from his face, leaving him the sickly shade of old parchment. His hand, still raised in the air, began to tremble. The silence that fell over the room was absolute. It wasn't just quiet. It was a vacuum. The music cut out. The clinking of glasses stopped. The only sound was the hum of the massive projectors behind Brock and the terrified, erratic thumping of his heart, which Aira imagined she could hear even from 20 feet away. Dominic stopped at the base of the stairs leading to the stage. He didn't shout. He didn't growl. He simply looked up at Brock with an expression of mild, dangerous curiosity. "Alpha Brock," Dominic said. His voice was calm, baritone, and projected effortlessly to the back of the room without a microphone. "Please don't stop on our account. You were speaking about loyalty and sacrifice, I believe. My companion and I are fascinated by the subject." Brock gripped the sides of the podium so hard, Aira thought the wood might splinter. He looked from Dominic to her, his eyes wide and frantic. He was calculating, his survival instincts warring with his arrogance. He decided to play the only card he had left, gaslighting. He let out a short, incredulous laugh. It sounded tinny and fake in the cavernous room. "King Dominic," Brock said, forcing a smile that looked more like a grimace. "What an unexpected honor. And you've brought a guest." He gestured vaguely at Aira, his eyes hard and warning. "Though I must say, I'm surprised to see former staff members attending a summit. This woman, Aira, was it? Was a maid in my house. We had to let her go due to mental instability." A murmur went through the crowd. Instability. It was a good lie. It discredited her instantly. "She was prone to fantasies," Brock continued, his voice gaining strength as he saw the crowd nodding. "Theft, lying. It was tragic, really. I assume she spun you some sob story to gain access here. You really shouldn't let stray humans manipulate you, Your Majesty. It looks weak." Aira felt the rage ignite in her chest. It wasn't the hot, blinding anger she used to feel. It was cold, it was precise. It was the anger of someone who had already died once and had nothing left to lose. She stepped away from Dominic's hand. She walked up the first 3 steps of the stage so that she was looking up at Brock, but only slightly. "Instability?" she asked. Her voice shook, not with fear, but with adrenaline. She took a breath and projected, just like Dominic taught her. "Is that what you call it when an employee refuses to be an accomplice to a crime? Is instability the word you used when you dragged me out of your office by my hair?" "Security!" Brock barked, panic flaring in his eyes. "Remove this woman. She is harassing a pack alpha." Caleb, the weaselly beta, jumped from the shadows of the stage, his claws extending. "You heard the alpha! Get out, trash!" He reached for her arm. Wham! The sound of flesh hitting concrete echoed through the hall. Caleb didn't even scream. He was face down on the stage floor, pinned by a black military boot. Commander Cade had materialized from the darkness like a phantom. He pressed his heel into Caleb's neck, just enough to cut off his air, not enough to kill. "Nobody touches the king's guest," Cade said, his voice a low grind of gravel. Dominic walked up the stairs slowly, every step a death knell. He stood beside Aira, towering over Brock. "You speak of theft, Brock," Dominic said, his voice dropping an octave, vibrating in the chests of everyone in the front row. "You speak of lies, but words are wind. I prefer numbers." Dominic raised his hand and snapped his fingers. The giant screen behind Brock, the one displaying the Silver Creek logo, glitched. The image distorted, pixelated, and then resolved into a new image. It was a complex banking spreadsheet, blown up to the size of a movie screen. "This," Dominic announced, turning to the audience, "is the result of a silent audit conducted by the Crown over the last 72 hours. It details the finances of the Silver Creek pack." Brock turned around to look at the screen. His knees actually buckled. "As you can see," Dominic continued, using a laser pointer to circle a series of red figures, "there is a discrepancy. $3 million of emergency relief funds, money the Crown sent you to feed your starving families, is missing." "Clerical error," Brock screamed, sweat pouring down his face. "My accountant made a mistake. I'll fire him immediately." "A $3 million mistake?" Dominic raised an eyebrow. "Let's see where the money went." The screen changed again. This time, it showed a chain of emails and wire transfers. The dates were highlighted. "July 14th, Aira said, reading the date on the screen. "The day you called me into your office. The day you said I was a spy." She pointed at the recipient of the wire transfer. "You weren't sending money to a charity, Brock. You were sending it to the Red Fang Syndicate." The reaction in the room was visceral. It wasn't just gasps, it was growls. The Red Fang Syndicate wasn't just a group of mercenaries. They were poachers. They were known for hunting supernatural children for the black market. For an alpha to do business with them was the ultimate taboo. It was treason against the species. "You hired them to eliminate the alpha of the Blue Ridge Pack," she accused, her voice ringing with clarity. "You paid them to kill your rivals so you could expand your territory. And when I walked in to clean your office and saw the transfer on your screen, you decided I had to die." "Lies!" Brock shrieked. He looked deranged now, his carefully coiffed hair falling into his eyes, his teeth bared in a snarl. "You have no proof. That email is faked. She's a human liar." "The IP address matches your personal computer," Dominic said coldly. "And the timestamps match the GPS data of your car driving to Blackwood Ridge." Dominic took a step closer to Brock, the Alpha King's aura unleashed fully now. It was a physical weight, a crushing gravity that forced the weaker wolves in the room to their knees. "You stole from the Crown," Dominic listed the crimes, ticking them off on his fingers. "You conspired with child killers. You murdered a neighboring Alpha. And..." Dominic's eyes turned black. The beast within him was surfacing. "You attempted to murder the woman who saved my son." The room went deadly silent. "What?" Brock whispered, his breath hitching. "When you threw her off that cliff," Dominic hissed, "she didn't just survive. She found a child in the river. My child. My heir. She broke her own body to shield him from the rocks. While you were counting your blood money, she was saving the future of the monarchy." The crowd turned on Brock instantly. The look of admiration in their eyes was replaced by pure, unadulterated hatred. He was a pariah, a dead man walking. Brock looked around the room and realized it was over. He saw the hatred in his peers' eyes. He saw the executioner in Dominic's stance. He knew he wasn't leaving this room alive. And that's when the animal took over. If he was going to die, he was going to take something with him. He looked at Dominic, then he looked at Aira. He saw the vulnerability of her human skin. He saw the way Dominic stood slightly in front of her. He knew hitting Dominic was impossible. But her... she was soft. "Die!" Brock roared. The sound of bones cracking filled the stage. In less than a second, Brock shifted. His tuxedo ripped apart as a massive, slate-grey wolf burst forth. He didn't lunge for Dominic. He feinted left and launched himself straight at her throat, jaws wide open, saliva flying. Time seemed to slow down. Aira saw the yellow of his eyes. She saw the rows of serrated teeth. She could smell the rot on his breath. In the past, she would have screamed. She would have cowered. But she stood still. "Don't move," Dominic had said. "Trust the shield." She didn't flinch. She stared straight into the gullet of the beast. And then, the beast stopped. He didn't stop because he wanted to. He stopped because a hand, a single dark-skinned hand, had clamped around his throat in mid-air. Dominic hadn't even shifted. He had moved with speed that defied physics. He caught the 1,000-pound wolf with one arm, his fingers digging deep into the thick fur and muscle of Brock's neck. The momentum of the lunge was arrested instantly. Brock's legs flailed in the air, claws scratching uselessly against Dominic's suit. A high-pitched whine escaped the wolf's throat, the sound of a predator realizing he is actually prey. Dominic's expression was one of utter boredom, though his eyes burned with a violet fire. "You thought you could touch her," Dominic whispered, but in the silence it sounded like a shout. "You aren't even worthy of breathing the same air as her." With a roar of effort, Dominic slammed the massive wolf onto the concrete floor of the stage. The impact was sickening, a crunch of bone and a thud that shook the floorboards beneath her feet. Spiderweb cracks appeared in the concrete around Brock's body. Brock lay there, whimpering, broken, unable to rise. He shifted back into his human form, naked, battered, and pathetic. He looked up at Ira, blood trickling from his nose, pleading with his eyes. Dominic placed his boot on Brock's chest, leaning down. "Cade," Dominic commanded, without looking away from Brock. "Take him to the ice ward, deepest level. Ensure he lives long enough to regret every single second of his miserable existence." As the guards dragged the sobbing Alpha away, Dominic turned to Aira. The monster receded, replaced by the man. He reached out and gently tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the restraint it took not to tear Brock apart. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. She looked at the spot where Brock had been. She looked at the crowd, who were now bowing their heads in respect, not just to the king, but to her. "I'm fine," she said, her voice steady. "Actually, I'm hungry. Can we get burgers on the way home?" Dominic threw his head back and laughed, a sound that broke the tension and signaled the dawn of a new era. The flight back to the Obsidian Peak was quiet, but it wasn't the silence of awkwardness. It was the silence of a battlefield after the smoke has cleared. Aira sat by the window of the private jet, watching the lights of Chicago fade into the darkness below. Her reflection in the glass looked like a stranger. The heavy makeup, the diamond choker, the dress that cost more than her parents' house. It was a costume. Underneath, she was still Aira. She was still the girl who flinched when a door slammed. "Stop thinking so loud," Dominic's voice cut through the hum of the engines. She turned. He had loosened his tie and unbuttoned the collar of his shirt, exposing the dark skin of his throat. He held a glass of whiskey, watching her with an intensity that made her breath hitch. "I'm not thinking," she lied. "I'm just decomposing." "Decompressing," he corrected, a faint smirk playing on his lips. He set his glass down and leaned forward. "You were magnificent tonight, Aira. I've seen seasoned alphas crumble under the pressure you just walked through." "I was terrified," she admitted, her hands trembling slightly now that the adrenaline was fading. "I thought Brock was going to tear my throat out." "He wanted to," Dominic said, his eyes darkening. "But he forgot the most important rule of nature. You don't touch what belongs to the king." Belongs. The word hung in the air between them, heavy and complicated. She touched the cold violet stone at her throat. She was under his protection, yes. She was the mother of his child, effectively. But what were they? Was she a pet, a political statement, or something else? When they landed at the private airstrip near the estate, the air was crisp and smelled of pine needles and coming snow. The motorcade took them up the winding mountain roads to the peak. This time, when the heavy iron gates swung open, the atmosphere was different. Before, the guards would nod stiffly or ignore her entirely. Tonight, as the car pulled up to the main entrance, the entire household staff was lined up on the steps. The guards snapped to attention, their fists over their hearts. The maids lowered their heads in deep bows. They knew. News of the summit, of the human who stood down a corrupt alpha, had traveled faster than the jet. Aira hesitated to get out of the car. Dominic opened her door and offered his hand. "Head up," he whispered. "They bow to strength. You showed them yours." She took his hand and stepped out. "Welcome home, Your Majesty," the head butler said, bowing low. Then he turned to her. "Welcome home, Mistress Aira." It was the first time anyone had called her mistress. But the formalities shattered the moment the front door flew open. A small, pajama-clad missile launched itself onto the porch. "Mama!" Leo, ignoring the protests of his flustered nanny, sprinted down the stairs. Aira dropped to her knees, not caring about the expensive dress, and caught him. The impact knocked the wind out of her in the best way possible. He wrapped his little arms around her neck, burying his face in her hair. "You came back," he mumbled, sounding sleepy and relieved. "I will always come back," she promised, kissing his forehead. Dominic stood over them, his hand resting on Leo's head. For a moment, they were a perfect, jagged little family. But as Ira looked up at Dominic, she saw a shadow in his eyes. The war with Brock was over, but the war for the throne was just beginning. The weeks that followed were a strange mix of domestic bliss and political Cold War. Winter settled hard over the mountain. The estate became a fortress of snow and ice. Era spent her days with Leo, reading by the fire, building forts in the living room, and trying to ignore the constant stream of visitors to Dominic's office. The Council of Elders, the ancient wolves who advised the king, were not happy. They tolerated her because of Leo, but they didn't accept her. She could feel their judgment every time she walked down the hallway. One afternoon, 3 months after the summit, she was passing the library when she heard voices. The heavy oak doors were slightly ajar. "It has been long enough, Dominic," a rasping voice said. That was Elder Silas, a man who looked like a dried apple and smelled like dust. "The boy needs a mother, a real mother, not a human placeholder." Era froze. She knew she should keep walking, but her feet were rooted to the spot. "Era is the only mother Leo knows." Dominic's voice was low, a dangerous rumble. "She is frail," Silas argued. "She will age and die in the blink of an eye, and she cannot give you more heirs. The bloodline must remain pure. You must take a mate, Dominic. The alpha of the northern clan has a daughter. She is strong, fertile, and of royal blood." "I am not interested in breeding stock, Silas." "You are the king," Silas shouted, slamming a hand on the desk. "You do not have the luxury of personal preference. The pack is restless. They see a human walking the halls, wearing the royal crest, and they wonder if their king has gone soft. If you do not claim a mate by the winter solstice, the council will move to challenge your leadership." Era backed away, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Gone soft." She ran to her room, the guest room, still, and shut the door. She looked at herself in the mirror. Silas was right. She was human. She was fragile. One slip on the ice, one bad illness, and she was gone. Dominic was an immortal creature of myth. How could she ever be enough? She started packing. It was a cowardly reaction, she knew, but the old instinct to flee, the one she learned from years of being invisible, kicked in. She would leave a note. She would tell Leo she loved him. But she couldn't be the anchor that dragged Dominic down. She was throwing clothes into a suitcase when the door opened. Dominic didn't knock. He walked in, took one look at the open suitcase, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "What are you doing?" "I heard Silas," she said, not looking at him. "He's right, Dominic. You need a wolf queen. You need someone who can give you a dynasty. I'm just the maid who got lucky." Dominic crossed the room in 2 strides. He grabbed the suitcase and threw it against the wall. Clothes scattered everywhere. "You are not leaving," he growled. "I have to," she shouted back, tears stinging her eyes. "I'm ruining your reign. They think you're weak because of me." "They are wrong." His roar shook the glass in the windows. He grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. His eyes were bleeding into full black. The wolf was right at the surface. "Do you know why I haven't taken a mate in 300 years?" Dominic demanded, his voice shaking with suppressed emotion. "Because the wolf inside me is picky. He is arrogant. He doesn't want power. He doesn't want a political alliance. He wants a soul that matches his own." "I don't have a wolf soul," she whispered. "No," Dominic said, his voice softening, his thumbs tracing the line of her jaw. "You have something rarer. You have a survivor's soul. You jumped off a cliff and lived. You walked into a den of monsters and didn't flinch. You looked me in the eye when alphas twice your size looked at the floor. He pulled her closer, his forehead resting against hers. "Silas says you make me weak. But for the last 3 months, waking up knowing you are in this house, it is the only time I have ever felt peace. And peace makes a king strong." He stepped back and reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small, velvet box. "I was going to do this at the solstice ball," he said, "with fireworks and music, but I think we're past the pageantry." He opened the box. Inside wasn't a diamond. It was a ring made of obsidian, black glass from the mountain itself, inlaid with a vein of white gold that looked like a lightning strike. "This is the Ring of the Night," Dominic said. "It has been worn by every queen of this peak for 1,000 years. It is said that if the wolf spirit rejects the wearer, the ring will burn their skin." He looked at her, a question in his eyes. A dare. "If you put this on, there is no going back, Aera. You become one of us. You become the target of every enemy I have. But you will never, ever be alone again." She looked at the ring. It looked like the river that almost killed her. It looked like the eyes of the wolf that saved her. She thought about the apartment in the city she used to dream about. A safe, boring life. Then she thought about Leo's laugh. She thought about the way Dominic's hand felt in hers. She wasn't a victim anymore. She was done running. Aera held out her hand. "Put it on." Dominic slid the ring onto her finger. She braced herself for burning, for pain. Instead, a rush of cool energy shot up her arm. It felt like standing in a storm, electric, powerful, and wild. The ring hummed on her finger. Dominic let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for centuries. "It accepts you." He smiled, and it was blinding. "My wolf accepts you." "And the council?" she asked. "The council can rot," Dominic said, pulling her into a kiss that tasted of whiskey and forever. "Let them challenge us. We'll take them all on." The Winter Solstice Ball was the event of the decade. Every alpha from the coast to the mountains was there. The music was loud, the wine flowed, and the tension was high. Everyone was waiting for the king to announce his submission to the council's demands. When the trumpet sounded, the ballroom doors opened. "Announcing His Majesty, King Dominic!" Dominic walked out, looking regal and terrifying, but he stopped and turned back to the doors, extending his hand. Aera stepped out. She wasn't wearing a gown. She was wearing a suit of white silk, tailored to look like armor. And on her finger, the obsidian ring flashed under the chandeliers. A gasp went through the room. They recognized the ring. They knew what it meant. They walked down the stairs together. They didn't stop until they reached the center of the dance floor. Leo, wearing a tiny matching tuxedo, ran out from the crowd and grabbed both their hands. Dominic looked at the stunned council members, then at the gathered alphas. "This is Aera," Dominic announced, his voice echoing with absolute authority. "My mate, my queen, the mother of the air." He looked around the room, his eyes daring anyone to speak. "Long live the queen." For a second there was silence. Then, slowly, the alpha of the northern clan, the one whose daughter Silas wanted Dominic to marry, stepped forward. He looked at Aera, then at the ring, then at Leo, holding her hand. He bowed. "Long live the queen," he rumbled. One by one the room followed. The knees that refused to bend for her 3 months ago hit the floor. She looked at Dominic. He winked. Aera squeezed Leo's hand and looked out at the sea of bowing wolves. She wasn't just a survivor anymore. She was the alpha of alphas. The maid was dead. The queen had risen. And God help anyone who tried to throw her off a cliff again. And that is the incredible journey of Aera, from a disposable servant to the queen of the supernatural world. It proves that sometimes the hardest falls lead to the highest places. I hope you got chills when she walked out in that white suit. If you loved this story of justice, true love, and wolf shifters, please destroy that like button. It tells the algorithm to share this story with more people. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you're the first to hear our next saga. Do you think Aera's human perspective will make her a better queen than a werewolf, or will it be a weakness? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and see you next time, and